I feel as though he lacks critical thinking skills. That was such an important piece to this story. It just sucks. It still sucks. What's the point of even reading? Like, I really debated, like, do I even want to finish the series? Hi friends, welcome to Currently Reading with Kimberly. Obviously I'm Kimberly, and today we are going to be talking about Crown of Midnight by Sarah J Maas, Heir of Fire, also by Sarah J Maas. Both of these books are from the Throne of Glass series. Since I posted a video, I think it's been almost 3 weeks, and that was because we went to Nashville and it was kind of in the middle of when I wanted to record a video for Crown of Midnight. Then I was almost done with Heir of Fire, so I decided I was just going to wait till I finished Heir of Fire to put together the review for these 2 books. And while I've been doing that, I'm actually almost done with Queen of Shadows. I'm about 66% way through this one. I'll probably do a solo review video for this one because I feel like quite a bit happens and I could dedicate a video to it solely. The way I'm going to do this video today is the first part of it will be a no spoiler review. I'll give you the no spoiler review of Crown of Midnight, do Heir of Fire, and then we will get into spoilers for the 2 books, and I'll make sure I have the timestamps below for you guys, so depending on which one you prefer to watch, you can just skip ahead. The no spoiler review of Crown of Midnight. I rated this book a 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Looking back, I feel like I probably could have rated it maybe a 4 out of 5, only because it made me very emotional in like a bad way. Like, I was very upset by what happened. I understand now that it needed to happen for the plot and for the storyline to move forward and for us to have all these other books in the series, but it still didn't make me very happy. The reason why I originally gave it a 5 out of 5, and I will stick with that, we'll stick with the 5 out of 5 that I gave it, was because I was hooked. I couldn't stop reading it. I couldn't put it down. I was constantly interested. I was very emotional, happy, sad, mad, all of the things. And like I said, I couldn't put it down. It was easy to read. It kept me interested. I tabbed a bunch of stuff. It's a good book. For me, it was the 3rd book in this series. For some people, it's the 2nd book. As if you've watched my other videos, you know that I've read Assassin's Blade first, then Throne of Glass, and then Crown of Midnight. I'm happy with the way I read it. I'll link the videos below in case you want to go watch those and you haven't seen those reviews yet. The main things that happen in this book is the love story between 2 of the characters unfolds, and depending on who you're rooting for the main character to be with, this book will either make you really happy or it'll make you really upset. It was kind of a mix of both. I'll get into more details into that in the spoiler portion of the review for this book, but I don't want to ruin it for anyone right now. I would say the plot lines that happen in this book are extremely pivotal to the whole Throne of Glass series. The things that happen in this book really set into effect everything else. It's very important. I wouldn't skip over it. I think almost as you can see, I tabbed so much stuff. Like, there's so many important things that happen in this book. I highly recommend this book. It is a part of the Throne of Glass series, so I would highly recommend you read it. And like I've said in previous videos, the reading order is completely up to you. This book had a little bit of everything. It has you emotional, it has you on the edge of the seat, it has you glued to wanting to know what's going to happen next. It has romance, it has action, it has all of the politics that come with like the fantasy world building. And like I said, the things that happen in this book are extremely pivotal, why can't I say that today? They're extremely necessary to the story of the whole, like, of the overall story in the series. I think that this book is definitely an easier read than Heir of Fire, and it goes quicker, and you'll see here, obviously, it's definitely a lot shorter than this book. I think Heir of Fire has 200 extra more pages or something like that. Let's get into the no spoiler review for Heir of Fire. In terms of stars, I gave this a 4 out of 5, mostly because I found it to be pretty boring. We get a lot more POVs in this book. We start to meet some new characters that are necessary and vital to the plot of the whole series. Those parts are fine and interesting sometimes, but a lot of the times I felt it to be very boring. After having read most of Queen of Shadow now, I understand why we had to have some of the more boring chapters in this book. It was almost like a build-up and a background into the characters, and kind of makes the Queen of Shadows, like what happens in that book, so much more interesting, and you're more emotionally tied to it. I would not say that this one is super fast-paced. what helped me get through this book, because I feel like a lot of people who are reading the Throne of Glass series, especially right now, are getting stuck on this one. I would just set that reading goal. I would set like every day, figure out what you can commit to, whether it's 30 pages, 60 pages, so like just have a minimum so you can get through it quickly and just like get it done. Things that happen in this book, you do need to know for Queen of Shadows. Actually, a lot of what happens in this book is very important for what happens in Queen of Shadows, and it makes Queen of Shadows that much more enjoyable of a read. If you, like, let's say if you wanted to skip this one and jump to that one, it's not going to be as enjoyable, and you're kind of not going to really know what's going on too much. Parts of this book that I did enjoy were getting to meet some of the new characters. Yes, there are boring parts to kind of learning about them and their story. However, I think they're going to be very interesting to have around, and I am curious. There is a female that is introduced, and I'm curious to see what kind of impact she's going to have on the story, especially in the following books. We also get to meet a very important love interest in this book. It's a very important read. There is not as much romance in this book. So I think I totally forgot to mention Crown of Midnight has a little bit of romance, a little bit of heartbreak, all of the things. However, Heir of Fire, there is romance, but it's very subtle. This is the beginning of a slow burn romance. 4 out of 5 stars, just because it was a little bit more boring. It was a little bit more slower paced. There wasn't too much going on. It was definitely more of like a character buildup. Is Celaena going to accept her identity and her fate, or is she going to continue to run from it and allow her emotions to be self-destructive and self-sabotaging? Or is she going to choose to overcome it and become the person that she's meant to become? That is the main point of this book, aside from meeting new characters that are going to matter in the storyline later. I try my best with these like no spoiler reviews not to give away too much. I do get scared because even if I give you like a little bit of insight into the plot, it's going to be a spoiler if you haven't read any of the other books, or it could even be a spoiler if you start reading the book. So that's why I'm very vague when I give these no spoiler reviews. I'm just like, is there romance? Is there this? Is there action? Is there politics? Like, I'll just give the very general basis of it, because I've watched so many reviews for these books that said no spoilers, and there were spoilers. Like, things that I might think are not a spoiler could be a spoiler for you, depending on how you read and the things that you pick up on or don't pick up on as you're reading. Let me know in the comment section below if the way I give the no spoiler reviews works for you guys, or if you would like it to be a little bit more detailed while trying to avoid spoilers, if that makes sense. Now we are getting into the spoiler review of these books, so if you don't want to hear any spoilers, I would leave now. If you are someone that has read these books and you kind of want to have a little sit down chit chat, this is what this next part of the review is going to be. I switch it back to Crown of Midnight, and I'm going to go ahead and share all of the things. During the first half of this book is where the love story between Chaol and Celaena kind of unfolds. We're given a little bit of a cliffhanger of it in Throne of Glass of, will she, won't she, will he, won't he, and it definitely starts to unfold in the first half of the book. As I mentioned in my review for Assassin's Blade and Throne of Glass, I was very much Team Dorian. I always felt really uneasy about Chaol. I just feel like he can't be trusted, and I always got the vibe that he couldn't trust himself. Like, he's very hot-headed, and he doesn't like think things through as much. At least I don't think he does. I feel as though he lacks critical thinking skills. He's very easily swayed, or he'll take things at face value rather than trying to look at the bigger picture or to look at multiple things that have happened. He'll just go, oh, well, this person did something this one time, and now I'm gonna label them as a monster. And it's like, how about you try to understand maybe and find out more things that happen? A lot that I could like really dissect about Chaol that really like bother me, and as I go through these reviews and he does stupid stuff, I will share those things. This book will show us who these characters really are. They're going to go through a lot of trials and a lot of tests, and it's up to them if they're going to choose to stay true to who they are and what they believe, or if they're gonna veer from that and do something really silly and really stupid. The things that like made me really emotional in this book is it just felt like Celaena kept getting backstabbed or betrayed, or like bad things just kept happening to her, and I feel like she's been through so much stuff, especially from Assassin's Blade, Throne of Glass, and then now Crown of Midnight. I just feel like she can't catch a break, and it's really frustrating because not only is it happening to her, but it's also happening to people that she really cares about. It feels like anytime she lets someone really close and she allows herself to trust them, either they will betray her in their own way and we can justify it right and wrong, but regardless, they still betray her and it hurts, or they extremely betray her and it causes not just her getting hurt it causes someone else getting hurt or killed, and like that's like extremely frustrating for me. Just want her to be able to live her life and have some sense of peace and happiness, but I guess in the grand scheme of things, with her being, you know, potentially the Queen of Terrasen, and if she does decide to accept her fate, she's gonna have to deal with stuff like that. Looking back, it feels like that's what these books are prepping us for, is that she's gonna have to start making decisions as a queen if she decides to accept it. We'll get into that in the next book. One thing I noticed is that from Throne of Glass, when Celaena had her alternate identity, I guess, just so the other court members who were in the castle didn't exactly know what her name was, they called her Lillian. There are specific quotes in that book where Chaol mentions that he likes Celaena as Lillian, that when she's behaving like this upper echelon court member with manners and all that stuff and not being herself, like she's really not herself, she's just trying to portray this false identity, he likes her, and he's like, she's actually tolerable and maybe she's not that bad. But then when she becomes Celaena and she doesn't really have manners, she puts her feet on the table, or she's like half chewing with her mouth open, like those are just like little things. But even just her like talking back or being a little sassy, he doesn't love those things about her, and that's what kind of frustrated me as to why she was drawn to him, because he doesn't actually love her, even though she feels as though he's more her equal than Dorian was. He's really not. Like, I actually think Chaol is below Celaena in terms of so many different things, and I just wish she had enough. It's weird because she has like self-worth and self-respect, but at times I do feel like she lacks it a little bit, or she's just like so hot-headed and she just like acts on feelings too quickly rather than thinking things through. I'm not sure. I didn't do too much analysis into that, but it just like frustrates me. But then again, she's also young, she's also like in love, and she's just trying to live her life and have a good time before she meets her fate. Chaol is constantly trying to control Celaena, whereas when she was with Dorian, he wanted her to embrace who she was. He wanted her to open up and just talk to him and just be herself. He wanted her to be so much more herself and to let her walls down than Chaol did. I think Chaol he wanted to know more about Celaena, but he wasn't ready to actually accept her for who she was and the things that she had done in the past. The other reason why I really liked Dorian for Celaena was because he was always able, like even with the bad stuff about Celaena, he still chose to believe in the goodness that was in her, that she truly did have a light. She had just been through a lot of darkness and she just needed to be in the right environment for that light to come back and to shine through, whereas Chaol just wanted to, I don't know, I think he just wished that darkness didn't exist. But you can't have Celaena without the good and the bad. That's like everyone. Like Chaol has good and bad parts too, and I feel like she was more willing to accept him. Biggest gripe with Chaol is that he's seen some of the messed up stuff that the king has done. He's heard the orders that the king has given, yet for whatever reason, he still thinks Celaena's the monster. I'm just like, the guy you're literally serving and you like swore to serve and like, you know, to die for is like is the worst person on the continent, let alone probably the planet in this book. I mean, we haven't met too many other people, but at this point, he is the worst. And you, like, as Chaol, he can't understand that Celaena's actually a good guy, even though she's done some pretty questionable stuff. But when you think back on it, all of the bad stuff she's done has been, I don't know, you might not agree with me, but I think it has been done with good intentions. Like, these were evil people to their core, and she was just like, yeah, she's angry and yeah, she's getting revenge, but these people were terrible. They were literally monsters. Like, why should she have let Archer go? That makes no sense to me. And I believe that Grave got what he deserved, and Chaol was pissed that Celaena didn't just like give him a quick death. Chaol was mad that Celaena literally like shredded him and like and tortured him. But Grave's literally a serial killer, and he literally did that to Neheme, and Chaol saw. Like, I can't wrap my head around the fact that he thinks she's the monster, when really all she's doing is returning the favors that these people have done to her and the people that she cares about, like the actual good people. I just, like, this man literally grinds my gears. I went from like, okay, maybe he's not that bad, to wanting to punch him in the face. Chaol always mentions he can't fully trust Celaena, and that he believes that that's gonna cause them not to be able to like have their romantic relationship. Celaena also mentions not being able to trust Chaol, but she can see herself trusting him if he just continues to show that his alliance isn't to the king. All she needed was him to literally tell her that the king was planning to meet with Neheme, and I think that she would have put her life on the line for him. Like she was going to do that anyways, even before that happened. But that was literally a pivotal moment for both of them to decide if they could trust each other. And for whatever reason, he just decided he couldn't trust Celaena with that bit of information. And it ended up literally ruining it for both of them. And that was such a domino effect to the rest of the story. And that is one of the things that happens in this book that I think had to happen. We couldn't get away without it happening, if that makes sense. Like someone really important to Celaena and important to the rebellion had to die for things to unfold the way that they need to, especially for Celaena to, I think, eventually accept her fate as the queen. The other thing about Chaol is that he just had such an inability to see that Celaena would put her life on the line and would protect him, Dorian, Neheme, and all the good people in the castle at all costs. It was just her against the king, but for whatever reason, Chaol felt as though Celaena at any point in time would kill Neheme or kill Dorian or even kill Chaol himself. And she never, maybe at first when she first got to the castle, but not after she got to know them and she got to see who they really were as people, and that the real villain was just the king. And she wanted to protect them. She wanted to do what she could to keep them safe. And for whatever reason, Chaol just couldn't believe her. That was such an important piece to this story. It just sucks. It still sucks. So moving away from the Chaol and Celaena love drama, we do get to see a little bit more about Dorian in this book and a little bit more into his perspective, which I enjoyed. I think Dorian is a very, very genuine and kind-hearted prince. I think that given the tools and the resources and the timing, he would betray his father and he would do what was best for the kingdom, and he would fight for the rebellion if Celaena decides to accept her fate as queen. I really do believe that he would stand by her. The other thing about Dorian is we find out in this book that he has true magic, and it's the ancient kind of magic. For whatever reason, Dorian is able to have his magic. They do mention that the spell that the king has, the Aderlan under, it only spells away new magic. But what's interesting though is that if Dorian's is ancient magic, isn't Celaena's ancient magic as well? Because if they both are rooted from their bloodline and their ancestors that are hundreds and hundreds of years old, why is it that he can use his but she can't? Even though Sarah J Maas gave us the whole excuse of it's ancient magic and not new, doesn't really make sense, because then Aelin should be able to have her magic. The biggest challenges that Dorian faces is that he is scared of his magic. He is nervous, obviously, of how Chaol's gonna feel, because he knows Chaol thinks magic dwellers are bad and that magic could be evil and all of the... Of course, Chaol would think that. So Dorian is struggling with accepting it and wanting to learn it and figure it out. Before Neheme gets assassinated, she does offer to Dorian that if he's willing to embrace it, she would love to help him in wielding it and how to tame it, especially because it will flare up at times that are very inconvenient, and we don't really want the king finding out that he has it, because either he could kill Dorian or he could use Dorian as a weapon. Word gates, the word keys, and the word marks are very prominent in this book. They'll be prominent, I feel, for the rest of the story. They are literally the pivotal pieces, the very important tools on the chessboard for the good guys and the bad guys. Whoever can get their hands on them and use them, it will be fruitful to their efforts. We learn more about the clock tower. Celaena kind of mentions that there is no real doors for the clock tower to get in or out. However, it is somehow connected to the library through catacombs and secret passageways. And during Celaena's little exploration of that, she finds over, I think it was at least 100. I remember it went up to 99. It might even have been more than that, cells. And they were all empty. And that's like kind of scary because she was seeing like what was left on the walls and the markings, and it looked to be very like strong, powerful, potentially even big creatures that are no longer in these dungeon cells. But there is one actually that for whatever reason got left behind. For whatever reason, the king decided that he didn't want to use that one or take that one wherever they moved the rest of them to. And so Celaena ends up having a run-in with him, and so does Dorian, and that's kind of where we find out a little bit more about Dorian's magic, and Celaena then knows that Dorian has magic, and she's not scared of him. She's not scared of him at all. If anything, she's more concerned for his safety now more than ever before. Doesn't ever like directly tell him that she has magic too. She doesn't ever directly tell him who she really is. And I think that that's mostly because she, as much as she trusts Dorian, as much as she believes he'd be on her side, I think she still is fearful that he could betray her, or the king could find a way to get that information from Dorian, even if it's against Dorian's will, and use it against Celaena. Like the biggest surprise that happens in this book is that we officially get the confirmation. I know I had already mentioned it. I'm trying to go in order the best that I can, but it's been a minute since I read this book, but I have like my little notes to find out that Celaena is Fae. She does have magic, and I didn't really pick up on it that her being human is her alternate form, that all Fae have another form, and most of the time it's an animal, so it would be like a wolf or an owl, something like that. And I didn't even think that, well, humans are animals too, they're mammals, you know what I mean? You do get confirmation that Celaena is Aelin. She does know who she is, but she was trying to run from it, and she figured if she could just embrace being Celaena, that the whole her being Aelin would never, she would never have to like accept that fate of being queen and being like not necessarily trapped, but like tied to a court. Like Celaena just wants more than anything to just be free of all her responsibilities, to be free of masters and free of people telling her what to do and how to live her life. And that is why, one of the main reasons why she's just been running from being the queen, and she also doesn't want to have to deal with the king. Looking back, there was definitely breadcrumbs that Sarah J Maas has left, and I would say there was breadcrumbs in Assassin's Blade and Throne of Glass that Celaena was Fae, especially because there's a point even in this book, like when she's running back to the castle to see if Neheme is in fact dead or if she's going to get to her in time. Chaol had said that he's never seen any human run that fast. And like there's just little stuff like that gets mentioned in those books. Yeah, I didn't pick up on it. I like had a weird vibe. I was like, I don't know if she could be, because it was weird because she was in her human form. I didn't think that would be like an alternate form for a Fae person. When Celaena does transition into the Fae form, she's trying to save Chaol and Fleetfoot from this, I forget which creature it is exactly, but they're fighting them in the tombs below where her room is, where like Elena is kept. And that's when Chaol sees her transform, and he is like such a little baby. He's like freaking out. He's literally so frightened and so scared of Celaena, and he like curls away from her, and I'm just like, are you freaking kidding me? You literally swore your life to the king, and he's like the most terrible person ever, and yet you're scared of Celaena, and she's literally done nothing but prove herself and her alliance to you and Dorian and everyone else that's good. Like, are you freaking kidding me? In this book, I really wanted Dorian to know that Celaena had magic and that she was Fae. I wanted him to know that she was Aelin. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out that way. Like I said, Celaena was just scared that it was going to be used against Dorian, or that the king would find out and use it to harm Dorian. So she was really just trying to keep that information in terms of trying to protect him. And also, I don't think it really makes sense for him to know that she has magic. Like, that's just another thing that could be used against them. After that night where Chaol sees that Celaena is in fact Fae and she does have magic, he decides that the only way he can protect her from the king, because the king, he really believes that the king's gonna find out, that literally the next morning at like the meeting, he tells the king that Celaena should be sent to Wendlin, I think is how you say it. It's like another kingdom that has this really big naval fleet, and the king has not been able to infiltrate and take control of that of like that land or that area. And so Chaol's bright idea is to send her there so she can assassinate the king and queen and get information on their naval forces. And I'm just like, what happens when she doesn't kill them? Or what happens when she does and the king gets more access to these things? And it like, Chaol just doesn't think shit through ever, and it like grinds my gears so much. And of course the king's like, oh, bright idea, yeah, let's send her off like the next morning. So within 2 days of all this crazy stuff happening, she's gonna get shipped off. The one thing that's really important is Celaena, when she says goodbye to Dorian, she does promise that she will come back for him. And for Chaol, when he went to go say goodbye to her at the docks, and Chaol comes to the docks to say goodbye to Celaena before she leaves for Wendlyn, she does give him the Eye of Elena for protection. She is really nervous that leaving is going to potentially cost Chaol and even Dorian their lives. She's also upset because now she can't help Elena in finding all the word keys and making sure that the king doesn't get access to more magic that he doesn't need. During the time that Celaena gives the necklace to Chaol, she also tells him who she really is, that she is in fact Aelin. And in that moment, Chaol has like, oh crap, I really messed up. Like, she can't be leaving. And it's just like, yeah, guy, like, yeah. See, that's what happens when you can't trust her and you just do things hot-headed and you never think anything through. You have no critical thinking skills. You just make all these really bad decisions. As much as Chaol realizes he made a mistake by having her being sent away, he also hopes, though, that she'll still be safer in Wendlyn than she would be staying at the Glass Castle, which could be the case. It could not. We'll dive more into that when I do the Heir of Fire review, because that's when it all happens. Dorian is really upset, though, that Chaol had suggested for Celaena to be sent away. He doesn't understand it. Chaol can't tell him. Celaena obviously doesn't tell him. And that is the beginning of the rift. Other than the first beginning of the rift between Dorian and Chaol and like their friendship, the first rift was obviously Celaena, when they were kind of not necessarily like fighting over her, but you know. And then once Chaol found out Dorian had magic, and then now that Chaol is sending Celaena away, it's like the third rift. Maybe even like we could even count the assassination of Neheme as a fourth rift, because Dorian really did like her and he couldn't really understand how Chaol could let something like that happen. Ending of the book, Celaena's going to be leaving to go to Wendlyn. We now have official confirmation she is Fae and she is Aelin. However, she still doesn't want to accept her fate as Aelin. She doesn't want to accept her fate to be Queen of Terrasen and to have to go battle this king as the queen. She just wants to be Celaena, and she just wants to be rid, like I said, rid of people telling her what to do, rid of masters, and she really just wants her freedom. She doesn't want to be tied to a court and having to lead a court, especially because she feels so much shame around how she left. She feels so much shame about not staying in Terrasen and not trying to fight and rebuild after all those years that she just ran away and never looked back. She completely took on a new identity, and there were so many people that made sacrifices so she could live that night. She just has so much shame around it, and it really is like the biggest, I would say, I guess we could say trauma or like scar that she has, that is really like, that's what really impacts her the most, and in a way we'll have moments of self-sabotage, if that makes sense. Now we're going to get into the spoiler edition of the Heir of Fire review. Like I mentioned, so we leave Crown of Midnight. Celaena is on her way to Wendlyn, and we're going to see what's awaiting her. Is she actually going to kill the king and the queen and get information on the naval forces? Like, what is going to happen? What is going to happen to Chaol and Dorian back at the Glass Castle? What's going on with, the word keys and the word gates and all of these weird things that the king is getting wrapped up into, or the king is doing. We get a lot of answers in this book, and we meet a lot of new characters along the way. I finished Crown of Midnight. I was struggling a lot with the breakup between Celaena and Chaol, because I wanted to believe so much that he would be different than who I thought he was, and he wasn't. And I just very much wanted Celaena to be happy and to have this love that she so badly wanted and deserved. And so coming into Heir of Fire, knowing that they weren't going to be together, I was just very heartbroken in that. And so I was like, what's the point of even reading? Like, I really debated, like, do I even want to finish the series? But I decided to give it a chance. It really doesn't help that this book can be quite boring at times. It is a lot to get through. And it is a slower paced book compared to Assassin's Blade, Throne of Glass, and Crown of Midnight. Looking back, I definitely think this book was meant to be like a I would say like a prequel to Queen of Shadows. Like everything that happens in this book we needed and we need to know about so we can go into some of the more like action and story development things that happen in Queen of Shadows. We do get to meet quite a few new characters. We meet Rowan in this book, and that's going to be Celaena's next love interest. Romance for this book, there's not as much as there was, I would say, in Assassin's Blade, Throne of Glass, and Crown of Midnight. This is definitely more of like a slow burn romance between Celaena and Rowan. We get a little, like I said, we meet a bunch of new characters that are going to either be on Celaena's side or they're not going to be on her side. It kind of, we don't know, but we'll see. The stage has been set. The point of this book is whether or not Celaena is going to accept her fate as Aelin or if she's going to stay as Celaena and run away. So is she going to accept her destiny and understand that the life she's about to live is going to not only affect her, but a bunch of other people, and she's going to have to, you know, literally fight for their safety and their freedom, or is she away from all of her responsibilities, essentially? Like, is she going to accept her responsibilities or is she going to run away? She's really dealing with that. She's also, in this book, having to learn how to wield and use her magic and control it, which we find out when she was a kid, it was uncontrollable for her because no one really taught her. She just had one really bad incident at the library where a bunch of sacred books were burned, and they decided at that point that she wouldn't be allowed to use magic and that they would try their best to like stifle it and just put her in situations where it wouldn't be triggered. It's not very helpful, especially when she's literally heir to a throne and there's a potential threat of their court trying to get controlled by the king. So it's just really interesting. But her mom, they do actually mention her mom was also concerned that her sister, so the mom's sister, which is Celaena's aunt, Queen Maeve, she's kind of a dark queen. Like, at least that's how they picture her in this book. And throughout this book, until the end, we're not really certain if Queen Maeve is actually bad. Say, up until like the last pivotal moments, I thought Queen Maeve was going to be actually nice and a good person. I was hoping that Sarah J Maas, the way she was writing it, that we were going to think that Maeve was an enemy, but really she's not. Really, she was just looking out for Celaena's best interest. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Maeve is only looking out for her best interest, period. She's like the king, just in a different font. During Celaena's time in Mistward with Rowan, he's teaching her how to harness her magic. She has to get her Aunt Maeve to talk to her and kind of give her more information about like the word keys and the word gates and all that stuff that Celaena needs to know if she goes back to Rifthold and to Aderlan to essentially not fight the king directly, but to kind of try to stop him. Queen Maeve is like, I won't do that unless Rowan gives you like the okay that you can come to Doranel, which is like where she actually stays and lives, and that's where I guess all of the Fae who are deemed worthy can live, and anyone who's not deemed worthy or who's like a half-breed has to stay in Mistward. She has to train with him and she doesn't know how long it's going to take, and he's like, you know, a lot of the people there are like, it could take weeks or it could take years. And so Celaena kind of like freaks out. So there's a lot of struggle, like a lot of power struggle going on during that time, not just with herself, but with Rowan and with some of the other people that she is around. And Celaena, her like the wall she put up because of what happened in Crown of Midnight with Chaol and Neheme and the king, she puts up this really like thick exterior, and it kind of starts to get cracks in it while she's at Mistward with the people that are there and with Rowan. She kind of starts to, I don't want to say she becomes herself, but she starts to become, I would think, someone else. I think during this book, Celaena starts to think more like a queen, whether she realizes it or not. I think she starts, like, the questions and the things that she does, there's a purpose and a bigger intention behind it. I mean, there always has been, but it just felt like this was a level above, like, some of the plotting that she was doing. What was really interesting is that Rowan had a mate, like, hundreds of years ago, and she was pregnant with his baby. He went away to war, comes back and finds out that her and, obviously, the baby, because she's still pregnant, they both got slaughtered, and he took him like 50 years he kind of just like was mourning their deaths, and that's when he decided to but to have a blood oath to Queen Maeve, and that's kind of like a barrier for Celaena and Rowan throughout this book, is his blood oath to her, to Maeve. He had a mate, because my thought was like, what if Rowan and Celaena are mates? Because there are some little breadcrumbs that are left in this book that kind of signal it could be a possibility. And then that brings up the question is, if he had a mate, could he have another mate later if, you know, your mate dies? Like, I don't think we ever got that confirmation in the ACOTAR books. I want to Google it, but I'm scared I'm going to get spoilers, so I'm going to try to hold off on that. Also meet her cousin Adian, who looks like her, but I guess the guy version of her, which is kind of crazy. And what's also weird is that it does get brought up that he had considered taking her hand in marriage and becoming king. And I thought that was kind of weird, because like they're actually first cousins, whereas Celaena and Rowan are supposed to be distant cousins. I don't think Rowan and Celaena are actually cousins. I want to Google that, but again, I'm scared of spoilers, so I'm just going to wait that one out as well. But I thought it was weird. Adian won't, but he was like, I mean, I thought about it. Like, dude, come on. Ain't no way. Some Game of Thrones stuff in terms of that. Like I said, we get multiple pops in this book. We do get a little bit more into what's going on with Dorian. He falls in love with the healer. I believe it's pronounced Scorcha. I'm not expecting Scorcha to be the spy. And we do get breadcrumbs of those letters she was writing to her friend, and she wouldn't even, like, when we were like in her point of view, she wouldn't even tell us like what she was writing in those letters, which was really interesting. So I don't know why, I just never picked up on that. I never thought that like she could be the one who had been selling these secrets for like 6 years. The king did end up killing her, and I feel like in these types of books and like with the politics and stuff going on, people do have to die, unfortunately. I mean, I hate that it was her, because Dorian truly loved her and he had considered making her a queen, but I guess I would rather it be her than some of our other characters that are so like near and dear. It is interesting that the king put the collar on Dorian. I didn't even think of a collar. I thought he was just going to put like one of the black rings on Dorian. We learn in this book that the ones with the collars are the Valg princes. That's like way worse than having a black ring on your finger. So I am a little nervous for what's going to happen to Dorian. Meet Manon Blackbeak. She is Blackbeak. She is one of the Iron Teeth witches. I don't know if she's going to be good or bad. I know like at her core she's supposed to be bad, she's supposed to be evil, but I think she has the potential to be an alliance for Aelin, aka Celaena. There is quite a few, like, there's a lot I think that happens in terms of plot in this book, but those are like the major key points. In terms of how I felt about Rowan when we first met him, I was kind of unsure. I was like, I don't know how this dude is gonna like get under like my skin. Like, I don't know how he's gonna prove to me that he would be a good love interest for Celaena. He kind of does a little bit. I'm not like super, I'm like, by the end of this book, I'm like wanting to know like what's gonna happen between them, but I was like, there was some stuff that he did that I was like, okay, that's kind of sweet, and then there was other times I was like, why are you have to be such like a jerk? But I think it's really because he's struggling with his own internal feelings, especially with his blood oath to Maeve, and for the fact that he had a mate who passed away. I think it's just showing that he's struggling with grief and with moving on. And Celaena is still struggling with that, even though her ex is still alive. It's still hard for her because in a way she's mourning a death of someone, because he proved to be like, Chaol wasn't who she thought he was. And so even though he's still alive, it does feel as though it's a death of someone who she thought she knew and loved, if that makes sense. So I feel like they can relate on a lot of things, and I do like the fact that they decide to have a friendship where they can be there for each other and to help each other grow and heal and just be whatever the other person needs. So like that dynamic is really interesting, and I haven't read a ton of books, but I haven't really seen that before, so I do think that's interesting about their love story. By the time I finished this book, I was super excited to start Queen of Shadows, and I'm almost done with that book. I'm like 66% of the way through, so hopefully I'm gonna have a review video for that one, just all on Queen of Shadows, because a lot happens in that one. But Heir of Fire, just be forewarned, it can be a little bit boring, but it is necessary. Like, everything that happens in this book is necessary. We also do see a few of our older characters from Throne of Glass. We meet Caltaine again. The Duke is brought up, Duke Parrington. I'm just gonna wrap up this book review for The Crown of Midnight and Heir of Fire. We're gonna wrap it up here. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. I'm gonna do my best to edit so it's not so rambly. If you have read these books and you have any thoughts or theories on like what happened, go ahead and leave them in the comments. Just make sure you preface that if it will have a spoiler, like just put that at the top of your comment. Just let me know if you guys enjoyed this review, if you enjoy these kinds of videos. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.